to Paul Sargent, who's the mayor of the city of Madison. I'm also from Coahoma County, Mississippi, which is a neighboring county to our honored guest here today. Mayor Sargent is attending a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Washington, D.C., and he has asked me to come here today on his behalf to welcome Mrs. Hamer to the city of Madison. Mrs. Hamer is no stranger in these parts. She's a household word in the homes of many Madison residents. The city of Madison, through efforts with Measure for Measure and Walker Development, has raised approximately $250,000 to help Mrs. Hamer with civil rights endeavors, and especially with our farm cooperative and other major projects. Mrs. Hamer has been fighting in civil rights for approximately 14 years. She's been special guest to heads of state. She has at least 10 honorary degrees, and also she was voted the most outstanding woman by the University of Mississippi. At this time, I would like to call on Martha Smith, who's a longtime friend of Mrs. Hamer, and also one of the founding members of Measure for Measure.
Being asked to introduce Mrs. Hamer because of our long and dear personal friendship. I think that you could say in this day and age of astrology that Mrs. Hamer is proof that there might be something to that art. She was born on October 6th, which makes her a Libra. And the scale of justice is the symbol of Libra. And she has worked all her life for equality and justice. And one of the things that makes her an outstanding person is her ability to see two sides of any issue. And her ability to stand pat against all odds has brought to her honors and appreciation from all the people who have had a privilege to know her. Those of you who have heard Mrs. Hamer before are back for more of the good stuff. Those of you who have never heard her before are today to be treated to something rare and different. Mrs. Hamer, with her basic intelligence and her understanding of human nature, has grown into being probably the wisest woman that I have ever known in my life. And it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you Fanny Hamer.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. As I look out in the audience and look at Sarah and Jeff and saw Debbie's mother, Miss Sweet. A lot of people, yeah, I see her now and again. A lot of my friends here that, has done a tremendous job in helping us in the state of Mississippi. But I want you to become aware, even though that we've received, quite a bit of assistance from the organization Measure for Measure and just concerned people from Madison, Wisconsin, we hadn't arrived. You here and we there hadn't arrived yet. Because this morning, before leaving Martha Smith's house, I thought that at one time, we were really moving forward. But as I looked at George Wallace making his pitch in Boston, Massachusetts, what is really place they call, freedom and a place of democracy. When I looked at him making his pitch this morning and how the people were standing up applauding, I'm still saying, Jeff, it's up south and down south, because it ain't no different than these white folk with this power. And I want you to understand that, because 1976, we are really living in a crucial time. We were just at the peak of being in dictatorship under Nixon's administration with a roguish self. See, some of you ain't gonna like it because, and I'm just telling the truth. So you can respect the truth, because if changes is not made in this sick country, it's not going to be me crumble. We are going to crumble, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. A nation that's divided against itself is on its way out. And when you see a place that's so prejudiced that anything is devised, anything is devised, not only for kids, it's for grown-ups, to brainwash and to give you what America is really, what it's all about. Like everybody is running around talking about the bicentennial year of the 200 years of American progress. Now, I just want to ask one question. How do you think black people, Indian people, and any other oppressed folk feel celebrating something that years ago that destroyed over 25 million of my people that was being brought here on the slave ships of Africa? Wiped out our heritage, raised families by our grandmothers, and taken our name, and today saying that it's wrong to bust a child for equal education. See, this kind of crap is nothing but an excuse. See, this is an excuse when they're talking about, we don't want the kids buff. And folks is buying. And we saying that we are for democracy and justice and placing mercenaries and Central Intelligence agents to kill my people in Angola. And there's something wrong with any place. We have supposed to be an example for the rest of the world. But how do you think it feels when a man is nonviolent, is Dr. Martin Luther King, that preached nothing but love and said wrong to kill? He was just assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. But it was people involved in that from the top to the bottom, and they didn't live in this house. See, we are sick. America is sick. And man is on the critical list. I have watched in the South, I have watched politics. And it got a beautiful name, but it's becoming politics. And, saw what they are doing. And, I wondered, will there ever come a time that we will actually have free election and freedom of speech is people right in this room that's been fired because of what they said and believed. So that's not too much for freedom of speech. There are people in this room with 12 and 13 kids that live on less than $100 per month. And the excuses that they are given in the institutions and throughout the country of people on ADC are shiftless and lazy. And if people had a chance, they would be glad to work. But it's people, minority people in this country, not only Indians, Puerto Ricans, blacks, and poor whites, that can't get jobs. And you see, I just can't see how people can say that we will support people in other countries and give millions of dollars and not doing nothing for their own people. See, I can't see that. And you can't see it. You might not want to admit it. You know, I used to just love to go north because I figured that people was, kind of free. But the blacks in the north is in a worse condition, most of them, than we are in the south because we know where we stand. And a lot of you don't. Some of you get a few degrees, a pretty good house, and a bill you can't hardly pay, trying to live like somebody else, and think you have a right. But honey, regardless of how you feel, we are in this bag together. And there's nobody at the University of Wisconsin and no other place in this country is free until I'm free in the South. And to be perfectly honest, we got more contact with each other than is here in the cities throughout this country. We can talk, and we got more communication than you have in most of the places in the north. In 1964, I was one of the founders of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that was organized to challenge the injustices and the different kind of inhumane things that was happening to us in the South. Today, across the country, other splinter groups have come up and made challenging not only Mississippi, but challenging America's democracy, because it's pretty hard to stand up and pledge allegiance to something we've never had. The words really mean something if it was enforced. But the shame that we have before us today is whatever happened to us can have to be legislated. But you can't legislate love. That's one thing that you can't do. And what America and the rest of the world need today, some kids put out a song some time ago. It's what the world needs now is love. But today people is not seeking and trying to find love, one of the greatest things of survival on earth, but seeking for more power. And power corrupt. And you know what? Maybe some of you say, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. But he's there. In the 6th chapter of Ephesians, and the 11th and the 12th verse, said, put on the whole armor of God, that he may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. And the 12th verse says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers, against principalities, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And people will go to any limit just for personal power. It doesn't really matter how the masses suffer, but just the few people, control it. I was really sickened. When I watched one day, I turned on television, and they were saying how much had been put in Angola to help a handful of white folk over there exploit millions of black people over there. So what I'm saying, if there's going to be any survival for this country, there must be, we have to make democracy a reality for all people and not just the few. Because there's no way in the world you can tell me how it feels to be hungry if you've never been hungry yourself. And you cannot say that you represent me when you don't know how I feel. People is going to have a chance to work and work together to bring about a change. Today I feel very humble in being in your midst, going through some of the problems that we're going through. I was almost ready to, I don't know really how to put it in words, but when we had a woman mayor elected, which is a doctor and a mayor and a judge and a justice of the peace and a real goofer that have goosed up the town of Rouville, the little town where I'm from. And then, I started reading. And I read about Eve and about Adam and how when Eve and Adam was in this beautiful garden, and all of this temptation was put out there. And finally, they were told of the fruit not to eat. Now, you know, a lot of people say, well, that's sex. But it was actually a tree. And it was called a tree of knowledge. And out of all of those trees, it was just that one tree, the tree of knowledge, were they forbidden not to eat that fruit. And that woman, Eve, was just exactly like the mare we got. And you know, she ate the fruit and then persuaded Adam to eat him and that something. Do y'all see what I'm saying? You know, I want the women, I'm talking to everybody, but I really want the women to think. Because we are living in real peerless times. We are living in the time when people can legislate to you whether you should kill your baby or go on and have your children. And you know, somebody put it so well, you know, they might not be married. And what about this kid that come out of wedlock? I said, well, they know they wasn't married before they conceived it. Right? They know they wasn't married. So you can't legislate how you murder a person. Take it from me. We are sick. And we've done so many things. A man was driving us, my cousin, Sophronia Conway and me, a couple of weeks ago from the National Airport to Bethesda, Maryland. And he was telling us that in the 40s, when he was in service, a black man, when he was in service, they had captured so many Germans. And he said, you wouldn't believe this, Miss Hamer. He said, even though they was prisoners, they were given more rights than we were. So they was allowed to go in places and theaters that we were barred out, but we had to stand on the outside to protect. This is ridiculous. Where millions of my folks have been destroyed, strip black men of their heritage, and Indians and any other minority group, but stripped us of our heritage, taking our names, integrated our families from the beginnings. My grandmother was a slave, and I just had plenty white, blue-eyed uncles. And today telling me, George Wallace in Boston, Massachusetts, that let the states handle it and don't bust the kids. Do you realize how sick we are? Because the political science that you are reading and that you are teaching here at the university is not the political situation that we are faced with out there day after day. But I want you to know something. We are not only fighting to free ourselves in the state of Mississippi, but we are fighting to save you here in Madison, Wisconsin, and all over the country. And our struggle has been very hard. From the jail houses to the graveyard. But we still have put 215 blacks in office in the state of Mississippi. We are going to fight for the kind of education that not only black folks should be aware of, but whites as well. Because you have been conditioned into the system too. I know you don't agree maybe with what I'm saying, but there's one thing for sure, you got a feeling it's the truth. When I watch sometime, I don't allow my kids to watch it. But when I sit down and look at television, and this guy playing the role of Tarzan and the native, the kind of things that you have distorted and said about my people in Africa, and going to Africa meeting people and having a chance year after year to meet my people from Africa. It's nothing for us to be ashamed of as being black. And I'm not fighting to be equal with you, but I'm fighting for human dignity. Because we are really sick. When the kind of stuff that's coming out now, they try to cover it up and they cover it from one side and leak out over here, and they're wondering who done the leaking and who is telling on who. And yet about all of them is confused as Richard Nixon. I'll never forget the time that I went to a conference on nutrition. And Nixon spoke to us that morning. And after that, I told him when the conference was over, I said, well, you don't worry about me coming back to conference on hunger to Washington, because they don't even know what to talk about. But we are sick. You know, when we have a man like President Nixon that finally resigned for stealing, but was powerful enough to dictate who the next president would be, which is your president now, Gerald R. Ford. I was on television in Washington on the panorama, and a man said, well, President Ford is a good man. Well, we was on television. I didn't want to hit that black man because that man is powerful. I didn't want to hit him. Not from to see us on television. He's been around the corner. We would have been running him now. But to do just some selected few, a few people out of millions with jobs, and people throughout this country suffering from hunger, malnutrition, and this kind of thing. We better straighten up, America, because everybody is not going to be as nice as the Indians when they welcomed Columbus and his group here that he said he discovered. And it was already folk killed. Just like, you know, we walked out there and get in a car and said we discovered it. How did we discover it if it's already made? It's later than you think. And it's time for us to work together to make this a better country. Because together we stand, but divided, we all perish. Thank you.
This is a continuation and conclusion of a recording of remarks by Fannie Lou Hamer of Freedom Farm of Mississippi and Ronald Thornton of North Bolivar County Co-op, also of Mississippi, at a Measure for Measure 11th Anniversary Reunion at the First Unitarian Society in Madison, Wisconsin. Taped on January 30th, 1976. This is tape 1 of 1, side 2.
Then we look on television where thousands and thousands of people in Vietnam has been wiped out, and they have the nerve to bring them here as refugees. We are sick. And the sad thing about it, we are not even fooling ourselves. But I care. I care enough to fight to make that piece of paper that was written a long time ago, which was the Constitution. I'm fighting to make it a reality. Not only for me, but for you too. Because your freedom is tied very close to mine. Together we stand, but divided we all fall. We've had problems in the state of Mississippi, but I must tell you, we've had some progress because we have elected 215 blacks across the state. For the first time in the history of Mississippi, I was invited to Governor Fannie's inauguration. Last Saturday, in Rural, Mississippi, we went up to the caucus. There were 32 votes for Governor George Wallace. 67 non-committees, which determined who was going to the precinct level. I was one of the delegates from Ruleville that was elected to go to the county convention. And we're going to keep on fighting because things is not as good as they should be. Because we have people in Sunflower County and women like my cousin, Sophronia, the mother of 12 children, 10 at home, and get $84 a month welfare, and have to pay $60-some for food stamps. Stand up, Sophronia. and doing the thing that we'll be doing and trying to do, growing our vegetables and raising pigs. As you know, we've had the pig bank program, but it expired after 3 years. But some of us still have a few of those pigs. And we hope in 1976 we will have a chance to have other pigs, because the 50 females and the 5 males has made it possible for us to distribute over 4,000. And we had known to help blacks. But it's a strange thing what people can do. A man came one Saturday morning, a white man, and he said, Fannie Lou said, I heard that you would help people. He said, my child is sick. We got to move. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't have food. And our child needs a doctor. A man that had been knowing me since I was very young. I called Mr. Scullard, and I told him to be a man up there. I said, you let him have stove and a bed, 2 beds, chairs, and things that he needs. I said, I don't have any money. But if I go and be able to be on the road, that I can raise a little money, I said, you know, I'll pay you. So we got this man set up, got his little son in the hospital, and as soon as the power structure seen that there would be some kind of coalition with poor whites and poor blacks as human beings, right away they throw him out of room. This is sick. Because what this is saying to us, it's not really a racist thing, but it's a power thing. And we know tonight we are not dealing with men, but we are dealing with the devil himself. Because the 6th chapter of Ephesians and the 11th and the 12th verse says, put on the whole armor of God, that he may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. 12th verse says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against power, against principalities, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Let's straighten up, people, and let's make that Constitution work. That one day I won't mind saying, my country tears of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee we say. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim pride, from every mountain side. Let freedom reign. Thank you.
The next thing on this schedule is questions. I think anybody that had any questions to ask at this point in time could get both Ron Thornton and Fanny Hammer off and ask them, because they're going to be around for a while. If you have any questions, please put them on. I don't know whether you picked up in this speech of Fanny Hammer the one thing that she said that really impressed me, so that I've known for a long time, those of us who measure for measure and those of us who contribute to the Friends of Fannie Hammer Fund know. And that is that when Mrs. Hammer travels on the road and receives money from speaking engagements, that's what she lives on. Her husband has not been able to hold a job since she tried to register to vote, other than with the agencies with which she deals. He is the finest, proudest, most gorgeous man you ever saw in your life. And he works like a dog for Freedom Farm. That's why I'm calling on that. What she makes to speak is what she lives on. A couple of weeks ago, she told me while she was here that a couple of weeks ago she was invited out to give a Fannie Lou Hamer Award, which was in the form of a silver medallion made by a famous artist, to be hung around the neck of some doctor that, an old doctor that was the head of AGW under Eisenhower. Now, if any of you know anybody that was the head of AGW under Eisenhower that was worth the Fannie Lou Hamer Award, I wish you'd please let me know. But anyway, she went out there to present him with the Fannie Lou Hamer Award of Merit. And the cotton-picking silver medallion that they hung around his neck was worth more than they gave her to go home with, which was $100 plus expense. Okay, the books that we have out in our lobby about Fannie Lou Hamer, there's not one single solitary bit, not one penny per book that comes to her for the use of her life for books that are being distributed about her. She's never had a manager, an old-fashioned solicitor. Her life, if she has a dime, she'll give 5 cents of it away and take the other 2 cents and put it in Freedom Farm. Now, we have donation bottles and boxes and cans up around here. And I want you all to search your hearts and your soul, and I want to tell you one thing about Measure for Measure's policy as far as our voted policy is concerned. If you give a check to Measure for Measure, it is equally divided between the Freedom Farm Cooperative and the North Bolivar County Cooperative, which are our things to support. If you give us a check that is earmarked for Ronald Thornton, who incidentally told me, and I laughed at him, I couldn't get over it. He put $4,000 of his own money, where he got it, I don't know. But anyway, he put $4,000 of his own money into some fund they needed for North Bolivar County Farm Co-op, which he'll never get back. And he has not accepted a salary from them for 6 or 7 months at a time during the hard times. And that's the kind of dedication he does. Okay. Now, if he's that dedicated to North Bolivar County Farm Co-op, we ought to be dedicated enough to give some money to help it where it won't have to delve into his pocket. If Mrs. Hanger is so dedicated that she's going to live her life speaking to people like us, telling us what we ought to know already, and then giving half of it away, then we ought to be very generous. Now, the buckets are around here, and by God, I have big pockets, and so does everybody else for better profession. Now, you better dig deep. Okay, that's called muddy pit. Was that pretty good noise? You ought to get the Academy Award. Thank you. Okay, now if you think that you came to a normal party tonight, a church social thing, you've already been shocked enough to know. Now, the next thing says dirty joke. But, you know, I can't think of one.
It was 5 minutes of racial slurs. Can we ask Mr. Taylor some questions?
Would you like to ask Ms. Hager some questions? I think that'd be cool, then I'll get my, and Ron. Okay, Ron, you come up here.
Just a minute, I'm sorry, some of my things don't have to go.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are, they have other things to do, and you should have had us in the beginning, because we love to hear Mrs. Hamer, but I don't think it's fair to them to come, and then we have a question and answer here.
The Ruth Harris Gospel Singers have been on the Madison scene for 11 years also. This is their 11th year anniversary. And we are proud to have them with us, and that's why I said if you thought you were coming to an ordinary church supper, you're sadly mistaken, because we're getting into a party. And this is the beginning of it, because this is when we start the celebration of life with Ruth Harris and her gospel singers. Now,
Where we're going, but
Albert Ritt, who has come all the way from Mississippi. I will turn the phone over to Ruth Harris.
Give me a man, Lord, to work for thee.